Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Denise Gary Show. It is my honor and privilege to have on the line with me today ARLENE Kushner. She is a journalist and based in Jerusalem, Israel. And I wanted to talk to her today about the fact that the Biden administration pressured Israel into an early premature ceasefire. I want to read to you something right out of Hamas's charter. It says, Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it. And it's important for all of us here in the United States to understand that not all the rocket launchers, not all the military and intelligence infrastructure, and certainly not all of the weapons caches throughout the Gaza Strip. I mean, picture this, there are rocket launchers on Israel's border across the Gaza Strip. And Israel did not have a chance to take out these rocket launchers. And if you'll recall last week, I reported on the fact that the Biden team was telling Benjamin Netanyhu, Israel's prime minister, that there needed to be an immediate ceasefire, and Biden wanted to see de-escalation on Wednesday. Netanyahu, the prime minister, came out and he said to the Israeli people, he wanted to assure them that Israel had significantly taken out a number of rocket launchers and other forms of military infrastructure and terrorist leaders. However, Netanyahu, Israel's leader, has not been able to take out everything. So today, ARLENE Kushner, our journalist and friend from Jerusalem, is going to respond to that. ARLENE, was this ceasefire imposed on Israel by the Biden team after only 11 days good for Israel's national security, certainly in the long term? Your thoughts?
No, I feel very strongly it was not. You began to explain it. It's important to understand the Muslim Islamist point of view. And it has to do with power and a sense of victory and a sense of their rightness, because all of Israel belongs to Muslims and we have no right to be here at all. This is not a two-state solution will make peace with them kind of issue. They wish to destroy us, right. And I cannot emphasize that enough. And they do not concede defeat. It is not in their vocabulary to say we lost. They always say they won, but in this case, it was close enough that they really believe they won, because even though we took out a lot of their munitions and we hit some commanders and we hit key installations, until the ceasefire was called, they had continued to launch rockets on us. They launched over 3,000 rockets on Israel in the course of 11 days.
The final,
and it was still going.
Right. The final toll, yeah. I heard listening to Israeli television, was over 4,000. I believe it was 4,000.
Okay, the figure I had was close to 4,000.
Very good.
Matter.
Yes, no, but it's a lot of rockets to fall on an isolated, the only Jewish state, the only liberal democracy in the Middle East. That's a lot of rockets to fall on a state, on a country about the size of New Jersey when you think about 4,000 rockets. ARLENE, you make an excellent point. Hamas, the Islamic resistance movement, Islamic Jihad, ISIS, a lot of Palestinians are moving closer to the Islamic State. They're all about beheading anybody that doesn't support the Islamic agenda of obliterating the Jewish state. Do you believe that this week we'll see an end to the ceasefire and more Hamas attacks?
I can't say this week, but what I'm picking up is, which I welcome enormously, a toughening of the Israeli stance, saying now the ceasefire was unconditional, but now they're talking about negotiating and so forth, about setting up terms that would limit the ability of Hamas to rearm and would control how much money can go into Gaza and so forth, all of which is essential if we're not going to go another round on this. but Hamas is not having it because they see themselves as victorious. And what I'm hearing now is that they're saying, you try that on us and you're going to get rockets on your head again. So I think that's where it's, yeah.
So you believe then that the Israeli government is talking to the Biden team and letting them know, we don't appreciate the unconditional ceasefire. And since the United States government has already, ladies and gentlemen, already in effect violated federal statute, the Taylor Force Act that was passed by Congress, by the Republicans in 2018, signed by our peace president, President Trump in 2018, the Biden administration has already crossed the line. I'm hearing that that Team Biden wants to rebuild the Gaza and has already given millions of dollars to the Palestinians. Do you believe, Arlene, they're sitting there in Jerusalem, do you believe that green-lighted this attack on your country when President Trump green-lighted that and told Tehran and Iran, because isn't this about an Iranian proxy war after all? But when Biden, yes, of course it is, yeah. and didn't Biden also green-light this by promising Tehran, Iran, $90 billion in foreign aid? Your thoughts, Arlene?
Certainly, Biden is playing to the Iranians. And certainly this whole war is a war with Iran because Hamas is simply a proxy for Iran and is funded by Iran. We know all of that. That's not a secret. But it's a question, too, which what I was saying, of the attitude of Hamas, that they feel strong, they feel victorious, and they're not about to let us limit their ability to rearm and reconstruct. And the other thing that disturbed me, and Biden said it almost immediately, and I think it's important for me to make this point as well. Biden said he's going to bring in a boss in the PA to oversee the reconstruction. Now, we see where Biden is going with this because Biden talks two-state solution, and he already said, Israel has to have a right to be safe, and the world must recognize it, but the world must also recognize a two-state solution. Well, I don't recognize a two-state solution because it's no solution. The PA is also a terrorist organization. The PA also wants us destroyed, and giving power to the PA is not going to bring peace to this part of the world.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you need to understand that Hamas has its charter or covenant. The Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, or the Palestinian Authority, also has its own covenant or charter. And ladies and gentlemen, please understand that when Arlene says there's no reason to support a two-state solution, the fact that Biden would pick Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the PLO, who's so corrupt, it's important for you to understand, people, that the Palestinian Authority, like Hamas, pays people to kill innocent men, women, and children. It's called pay to slay. And this is why the Republicans last week tried to get passed in Congress an act called the Palestinian International Terrorism Support Prevention Act that would actually sanction any foreign entity or company from providing financial support to the Palestinians, whether they're under Mahmoud Abbas, as Arlene Kushner just pointed out, or Hamas. They're corrupt and they pay terrorists to kill children. And this is what Israel's facing. Arlene, let's move quickly. We've got about 5 minutes. What about the pogroms, Arlene? I heard the president of your country, President Rivlin, come out and talk about pogroms that Muslim Arabs on the streets, the Democrats in Congress talk about apartheid in Israel, Muslims living side by side with Jews and Christians in cities and communities. walk out of their houses at night to go out to dinner, just like Jews and Christians go out of their houses and go to dinner. But the Muslim Arabs, instead of living in peace with the Jews and Christians in their communities, are trying to lynch mob, coming together as mobs in the street and trying to lynch Jewish civilians. Tell us about that, Arlene.
Okay, let me make a few points on that.
Please.
There was a hot time last week where this was happening in particular in a handful of cities that had mixed Arab-Jewish populations.
Sure.
Many of the cities in Israel are either all Arab or all Jewish. We're talking about Lud and Accra and Rabla and a number of other cities. It is not going on all the time. It is not the same now. But my own feeling is those who did that are Islamists in their heart as well. There's hatred in their hearts. And I have raising serious questions, and it's not all the Arabs. Some of them are peaceful.
Right.
But those who feel this way, and they're incited by Hamas. If it weren't for Hamas, this would not have happened.
Well, they're also
incited by Hamas.
They're also incited,
and
Arlene.
The question is, how do we handle this now?
Well, I think it's unfortunate that Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestine Liberation Organization, or the Palestinian Authority that's in the Judea Samaria part of Israel, that they have summer camps and they're teaching their children to commit terrorism. When you're indoctrinated from cradle to grave, of course there's going to be that Islamism or that Islamic hatred towards the Jewish people. We're not saying that all Palestinians are like that. There are some Palestinians that want to live in peace. But I
want to make another distinction, if I may, please, because I know time is very short.
Sure.
You have to differentiate between the Palestinian Arabs who live in Judea and Samaria in the areas that are controlled by the Palestinian Authority, and Arabs who are Israeli Arabs who live inside of Israel and have rights as citizens.
Right.
This is not the same population.
Right.
And the problem is that many, not all, of those who have citizenship have never, in all the years since Israel was founded, identified with Israel's right to exist. They accepted citizenship, but they still observed Nakba Day, which means the catastrophe, because they lost the war, and they'd like to redo it and win the war, and in their hearts there's still bitterness because they lost. They haven't let it go. And then they are ripe for incitement by Hamas, because Hamas is behaving the way it is. And then we had the horrendous situation that we did last week when there were pogroms. I cried. They destroyed synagogues. How does it happen in Israel that synagogues are destroyed, or Jewish schools? And I will tell you, I have a grandson who goes to a Jewish school, a yeshiva high school, and he had to be sent home because the head of the school said it's not safe for the Jewish students to be here right now. And I said, wait a second, this is Israel.
Right.
And that's what happened last week.
Right.
And it broke my heart, it grieved me, and it enraged me. And I feel we have a serious problem with not all of them, but with those who don't accept Israel's right to exist and really would like to see it undone.
And isn't it interesting that the German population accepts the fact they lost 2 wars in the last century, World War I and World War II. The Japanese accept the fact they lost the war in World War II, but Muslim Arabs can't seem to accept the fact that
this is a religious obligation.
Exactly, and that's the point. And I think it's incredibly sad that Israel has to fight this war of attrition every day, and the Muslims can't accept international law because Israel fought a war of self-defense in 48 and 56 and 67 and 73, and now today this war of attrition. Arabs need to recognize the fact they got practically the whole of Palestine, the Palestinian Mandate in 1922 under the Transjordan leadership of the king there in Transjordan. Palestinians have a state. and certainly they don't need to destroy the state of Israel. But you're right, it's about Muslim supremacy. It's about Muslim supremacy or Islamic supremacy. Real quick, we've got to go. I want you to comment on these Democrats in Congress, people like Ellen Omar from the Sudan. People like
so despicable. There's no words except despicable.
Well,
the fact that people like this sit in Congress today boggles my mind. Now, she accuses us, and this is what I'd like to end with, of being an apartheid state. And for your listeners, I want to make this very, very clear. When I talk about Arabs who are citizens, they are full citizens in every sense of the word.
Right.
They can live anywhere in the country. They can move anywhere in the country. They have the same rights in terms of welfare and health care and pension benefits, education benefits. There's no difference legally between Arab and Jew in terms of those who are citizens inside of Israel. And not remotely by any definition could anybody say that Israel is an apartheid state. It's a ridiculous statement.
It is, and I think it's important for the American audience to know that the Arab Muslims have their own parties in the Israeli Knesset, in Israel's Congress.
That's right.
I mean, they're elected to the Congress there in Israel.
They have people, ministers, they have judges. They are allowed to be part of the system in every sense. They're not
doctors, nurses, teachers. Right, exactly. They're in every profession. And they're able to live in peace in Israel if they choose to, because Israel wants nothing but peace. If they're citizens, they can. Well, even non-citizens, there could be peace in Israel.
No, but you can,
there could be peace in Israel if Muslims would accept Jews' right to a state. There would be peace.
But you can't take an Arab who lives in the PA and he can't march in here and say, okay, I have a right to health care and pension.
Well, right.
That kind of stuff applies to citizens.
Right. I understand.
Can I make one pitch before?
Sure.
May I make one pitch?
Yes, of course you can.
I do writing and I maintain a blog. Everything I write is on my blog, as well a full website with a lot of information. And if at least some of your listeners would like to look into it, you'll find more. You can always there's a way to write to me. You can always ask me questions. If you just access arlenefromisrael.info, you can find me.
Arlene, ARLENE, Arlene from Israel.
All together.
Arlene from Israel. .info. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
INFO.
Very good. Arlene Kushner.
I would welcome the opportunity to provide information to more people.
It's a wonderful newsletter. I get her newsletter, ladies and gentlemen, and it's just wonderful. It's full of information and it's great. Arlene Kushner, thank you so much for coming on the Denice Gary Show today. You're so welcome.
Thank you.
Have a blessed and wonderful evening. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.
President Trump has correctly stated that economic security is national security. And in the Tehachapi Mountains of Kern County resides a United States defense contractor, Anates Products. Here is the Silicon Valley of the aerospace industry, right here in East Kern. Anates Products is a forward-leaning manufacturer and distributor of hardware sold to major defense and aerospace companies. We're talking about Boeing, Lockheed Martin, United Technologies, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon General Electric, and on the list goes, as well as to every United States ally worldwide, including Israel, America's most important strategic ally in the Middle East. And for everything that flies, Anates Products is providing the parts. And with me today is the president of Anates Products, Scott Baker. Hi, Scott.
How you doing?
You believe this corner of the county is the hub of the aerospace industry.
Well, this portion of Southern California here out in the Antelope Valley, it contains, some of the most cutting edge technology going on in aviation today. We have some of the UCAS programs with unmanned technologies going on. We have Edwards Air Force Base out here who's doing continual testing in their area. We have the Naval Weapons Station up there at China Lake doing some fantastic cutting edge stuff, cruise missile technology. Those things are going on. We have Scale Composites locally doing a lot of composite technology, which is SpaceX, which is a private entity putting things in space now. This area is the growth center for aviation's future. This is the area I think that as a nation we need to be concentrating some of our effort, taking this technology, and as we all know, with the space program from Apollo years ago, out of these technologies, we, the private sector, are going to reap some of the benefits of that.
Thank you, Scott. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Baker, president of Anatase Products. Anatase Products, located in the beautiful mountains of Tehachapi, California, in eastern Kern County, is home to some of the most innovative and specialized technologies in the world, including those at the U.S. Naval Air Warfare Center, Weapons Division at China Lake, Edwards Air Force Base, as well as Strata Launch, launching satellites capable of delivering multiple orbits in a single flight to space. And it is Anatase Products that has provided the manufactured devices, and the president, Scott Baker of Anatase Products, Marine Corps veteran, reactivated on 9/11 to monitor threats to the homeland, is carrying on a tradition of providing for the security of the United States by manufacturing every kind of fastener on anything that flies, as well as providing a full testing destructive laboratory. Contact Anatase Products, now in business for 30 years, at 661-822-6873. Located at 1314 Goodrich Drive in Tehachapi for your manufacturing and testing needs today.